Hi, we're here today with Kim Osmani from DRS. Kim, would you take a moment and tell us what DRS is and your role there?
Sure. DRS actually stands for the Department of Rehabilitation Services, and in Oklahoma we have what's called a combined agency of all disabilities and visual disabilities. Nationwide there are about 80 agencies like ours, and some of them are combined like ours and some of them are separated out into two separate agencies. The essential core of our agency is to help all people with disabilities prepare for employment, gain employment, and maintain employment.
So if a student was going to go to college, would they still need to be referred to DRS?
Absolutely, if they're a student with any kind of physical, cognitive, mental disability. We have all different types of services to help students with mild disabilities all the way to those with significant disabilities.
How would you help someone going into a college setting?
We can help with preparation for ACT, we can help with preparation for independent living skills, assist with filling out the applications and sources of financial aid. Depending on their income, we might even be able to help them pay some of their tuition, books, fees, transportation.
So the goal still would be employment.
The ultimate goal for anybody we serve, regardless of what service they get from us, is ultimately competitive integrated employment in the community, which means they'd be getting minimum wage or higher in a setting where they're working with people with and without disabilities.
Okay, so I know every year in the classroom some people hear, well, you can fill out the DRS application, but no one ever hears anything from them. What would you say to those educators?
My guidance to our counselors is always to try and give whatever feedback they can to the teachers. So I've recommended that they even create like a simple Excel spreadsheet where they have a tab either by teacher or by school or by class, and they can give regular updates to those teachers on those referrals or on those applications. Because if we're having a difficult time either getting information from the parents or even getting the parents to show up for a meeting, we can tap into the resources and assistance of the schools who possibly see those parents more than we do to get those applications in.
I've also heard there are different levels of clients, and tell me about those and what separates someone from each level.
So kind of backing up a little bit, in order to qualify for our services, our eligibility, basically there's a few tiers. We say there's 3 tiers. The first is you have to have a documented disability. So for kids in the public schools, that's pretty easy to accomplish that first tier, because if they're on an individualized education program, an IEP, then we'll gather that documentation, copies of medical reports, psychologicals, transcripts, grades, all those kinds of things. If they're on a Section 504 plan, similar type of documentation. It's the other kiddos who have disabilities that may not be getting any kind of services whatsoever in the school. So when you think about students who might be diabetic or who have chronic health conditions or maybe simply just have a hearing aid and they're in school but they're functioning fine, we need people to be thinking down the road about what might they need in employment. So the first tier is, do they have a documented disability? The second tier is, does that disability create barriers to either preparing for employment, gaining that employment, or even retaining that employment? And do they need our services in order to accomplish the things that they want to, and can they benefit from our services? So those are the 3 tiers of eligibility. I say there's a 4th tier as well, which is you have to want to work. So a lot of people come to us and they say, oh, well, I just need a lift so I can get in my house, but they don't want to go to work. Or teachers refer students to us just for driver's ed, but they're like, oh, well, they don't need other services, they just need driver's ed. That's not what we're here for. We're all about employment. So once eligibility is determined, we do have 3 priority groups, and the federal government says we must serve those individuals with the most significant disabilities first, and that's our priority group 1. They have to have at least 3 barriers to employment based on that disability. And then the next level is those individuals with significant disabilities, and that's priority group 2. And then the non-significant disabilities is priority group 3. And why it's important to know those 3 things is there are times when in situations like we're in now where budgets are really tight, there's a potential for us to have to go on what we call like delayed status. I hate to say a waiting list because everybody equates that with the DD waiting list, which is 7, 8, plus years. For us, it's more of a delay. And so right now, everything is open in our agency. If we have to go under what's called order of selection and have a delayed status, then we might close just priority group 3 for non-significant, which means we're still serving anybody that comes in the door that's eligible for the first 2. But those that apply that would be eligible in 3 would just be in delayed status until we look at our budget on a monthly basis and start letting people off the waiting list. And then there are times where we close all 3 groups. And then the way you come off the waiting list when we look at the budget monthly is what date were you determined eligible and which priority group are you in, because we're always going to go to priority group 1 first.
So if you're looking at what date they're eligible, it's still going to be really important to refer even if those priority groups are closed.
Absolutely. If ever schools or anybody else out there hears, well, DRS is on a wait list, so there's no point in applying, that's absolutely false. We take applications under any circumstances. We need to get those referrals, and it's important because if you don't, they're never going to get the services. So we need to get them in and get them determined eligible so they're in the system.
So you mentioned driver's ed, and a lot of times people think of DRS services occurring after high school. What is the age that students can apply for DRS services, and what type of services could be offered while they're still in high school?
That's a good question. We start serving students at the age of 16. So we really recommend that they refer them to us at 15 and a half so that our counselors have the time to gather all that documentation, determine eligibility, create their plan for employment, and then be able to implement services at 16. That doesn't mean that someone who didn't get in the system at that age can't come at any time thereafter. They can, but we really, really, really need them at 15 and a half. If we wait, sometimes it's just too late and they've lost opportunities. The types of services they can get during high school, obviously everybody gets from their counselor, their voc rehab counselor, career counseling and guidance. So assistance with kind of honing in on what that career is that they want to do, what's it going to take to get there, kind of that forward thinking, that planning and mapping out. We can do a vocational evaluation where some of it is paper pencil, some of it's hands-on, looking at manual dexterity, fine motor skills, and kind of give a report back to the voc rehab counselor to say, here are some areas of strength of this client, and here are some areas of weakness, and here are some recommended career areas based on all the assessments we did to help kind of guide that. And all of that information is good to be used on the IEP and planning at the school level as well. It can help support teachers with the transition assessment piece that they need and goal development. In addition to that, driver's ed is possibly one of the services, but what we need everybody to understand is what we provide through contracts with driver's ed providers is specialized driver's training for people who have significant disabilities that without it could not be successful. So if it's just because a school district's not providing it or parents can't pay for it or whatever the case may be, that's not a reason for us to provide it, because some of the services for driver's ed cost about $3,000. It's very specialized. We have paid work experiences. We have full school year internship programs through Project Search, which we have 6 locations in Enid, Oklahoma City, Norman, and Yukon, which is they basically do 10-week internships, and they get 3 different experiences throughout the school year. We have lots of summer programs that we're providing. This year we're starting a new STEM camp. We're doing an ACT prep for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. We've got our Odd Jobs summer work experience program happening in Oklahoma City, Norman, and Owasso. And a new one called WOW, which is working on the Wichitas, where there's 10 students who will camp Monday through Friday, and they will work with the park ranger a third of the day, painting cabins, clearing hiking trails. What else are they going to do? They're going to be moving invasive species. So they'll spend a third of the day doing that and getting paid for that work. A third of their day will be spent doing applied like employability skills training activities, everything from resumes to social skills, budgeting, independent living. And then a third of their day will be doing recreational fun things within the park, swimming, hiking, fishing, all of those things. So there's a variety of services. And then the great thing about us is even, we want to get connected with kids when they're turning 15 and a half, 16, because we stay with them even after they finish high school, whether they drop out, graduate, or reach the maximum age of eligibility. If we have a case on them, we keep it. And so even though they're finishing school and school can no longer support them and provide services, we can. And so we're that kind of continuity after to help them with whatever that next step for post-secondary education and training is, if it's career tech, 2-year college, 4-year college, or going straight to work. We can help with those supports.
So let's say that unfortunately a teacher or a school did not refer a student to DRS. Can parents refer a student to DRS, and how would they do that?
Absolutely. Parents can. Students, if they're 18 and older, they can, apply themselves. And we actually have an application on our website. Our website is okrehab.org, and it's at the very bottom. It says apply for services, and everything you need is on there. They can contact us directly. You can even put in the name of a high school that the student attends, and it will pop up with the information of the office that would serve them. So the parents can contact that office directly.
That sounds great. So what happens if a student has graduated, they receive DRS services, they get a great job, but then, as we know in our economy, it could happen that they would lose their job? Mm-hmm. Do they need to fill out another application to receive more services? What would they do in that situation?
Well, again, and that is different for every individual. So just like schools would make decisions for students on IEPs on an individual basis, so do we with the IPE. We would look at, how long has it been since they've had that job, since their case was closed with us, and what level of services do they need from us? Because in a lot of those situations, it might be something as simple as job placement. And do they really need our help for that, or is that something they can do on their own now? But if they need, if it's been a long time since they've been closed and they need significant services, they will just submit another application. But we have enough documentation, that we wouldn't necessarily have to have a lot of information unless years have gone by. But there are some situations where they've been closed and it's been pretty recent, and we can do what's called post-employment services, which is kind of a short-term, real mild level of service delivery, like a job placement kind of thing, or employment retention. Let's say they're on a job, and in order to keep that job, maybe they need some accommodations in the workplace, or some surgery or something, and we can do that under something called employment retention. And so we can just do it under that existing case.
So a lot of educators say they have a huge problem with students who are currently receiving SSI, Social Security income, that either the student or their parents don't want them to work. What would you say to that?
That's a huge issue nationwide. There's such a false sense of security with that, say, $700 a month check. And I realize there's a lot that goes into trying to even get that disability income. There's a lot that goes into getting the medical that goes along with it, and the fear of losing it. But what we need everybody to understand is there are trained professionals out there, some of them that are employed by us and some that are employed by the by OU, their Oklahoma Work Incentives program. And while students are under the age of 22 and going to school, the students receiving Social Security benefits, they're actually exempt. There's a student earned income exclusion or exemption, and they have to apply for it through Social Security. But what it does is it allows them to have paid work while they're in school and earn up to like almost $1,700 a month, or like $7,600 a year, whichever comes first, and not one penny of their Social Security check will be affected. So that's a great way for students to be able to get experience, work experience while they're in school, to demonstrate to their parents, the school, to VR, to whomever's working with them, that they can work. And it gives such a sense of pride and self-fulfillment to be able to do the things that they enjoy doing. Now, when we look at the graduating piece, oftentimes we have a really difficult time getting parents to sign our application because of the fear of losing that check. And we have the benefits planners that I was mentioning before, who are trained to sit down with those families, and they can take that check and say, okay, Amber's getting $700 a month in Social Security, and we want her to be able to maintain her medical, so we're going to do these calculations. Here's how much Amber can earn without losing her check and losing her medical. So in certain situations, yes, once they graduate, they no longer have that exemption, but what they do have is the ability to work, get a paycheck, and still get a Social Security check, and still get their medical. And that's what we have a really hard time convincing parents of. It's almost like they don't believe the system, which I completely understand. It's a difficult system to navigate, and once you're out, they think it's really hard to get back in, but it's not for youth. What they also have to understand is that at age 18, those kids have to go through that redetermination process anyway on their own. So I would just really encourage them to get with a benefits planner to really see, because if that student's getting a $700 a month check through Social Security, maybe they can go earn $500 a month, on a job working part-time, and maybe it only decreases that $700 check by $100 or $200. Now they're bringing in $1,000 to $1,200, or somewhere in there. and working and gaining friendships and being social and learning those independent living skills. So there's so many benefits to going to work that we really need parents to recognize. And the research shows that if you live off Social Security, you're going to live a life of poverty, and you're setting up the next generation of your children to live that way and your grandchildren.
So you're saying it is a formula. If a person who receives SSI gets a job, it doesn't just immediately go away.
No, but what they have to do is make sure that they do it within that formula that is set up specifically for them. Otherwise, there is a potential of losing your check if you don't do the right things. So yes, absolutely, it's very individualized.
Great.
Your check would be different than mine if we were on that.
Thank you, that was very helpful. Do you have anything else you would like to add?
I just want to encourage all of the students that are taking this class, whether they're parents, teachers, administrators, to really understand that DRS is all about going to work, and that we should all embody what we call the employment first philosophy, which is let's give everybody, regardless of severity of disability, the opportunity to demonstrate that they can work before we start looking at other options, such as an adult day center or sheltered workshop or just staying at home. And we as an agency need to be at the table, and we would love to come do outreach to 14 and 15-year-olds and even make presentations at schools about who we are and what we do, and getting those kids and their families prepared for when they are old enough to apply for our services. We really need to be talking about careers and their futures, and not everybody goes to college, but you might ask a whole group of seniors what they're doing and they're all going to say they're going to go to college. And so we really need to be able to give very specific guidance and services to students with disabilities to help them go in the direction they want to go. And so I really just encourage everybody to get DRS at the table. We need to be at meetings. We need to be able to share who we are and what we do, and just help us get those applications and educate families about the importance of connecting with us. And you know, this is really important because July 22nd of 2016, this coming summer, a new piece of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act goes into effect, which is the Section 511 piece for youth. They cannot go straight from a high school to a sheltered workshop without coming through VR first. And so it's going to be very difficult and I think it's going to be a very challenging transition for a lot of families and schools who maybe that's been their plan all along, and DDS will not be able to fund any of those placements without it going through us first, for us to make a determination whether they can or cannot work independently. So I would just say really we've got to embody that and try to give students the opportunity to show us, because what they do in a classroom is very different than what they might do out in the community. You know, in a classroom we're expected to sit and learn and listen and do these things, but out in the community, give me something to do hands-on, let me be moving around that I like doing, and I might act completely different.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any contact information you would like to share in case someone has further questions? Absolutely.
They can reach me on my office phone at 405-635-2768, or they can even email me at kosmani@okdrs.gov.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.